Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to be talking about the Colombian conflict, a war over land, power, and drugs. So basically what the Colombian conflict is, it's a civil war that's been going on in the country of Colombia for over 50 years now, even longer if you really consider it technically. And what it is, it's a battle between a rebel group and the Colombian military. They're fighting over land, power, resources, and everything in the country. And basically, the rebel group is called the FARC, or the Fuerzas Armadas Revolucionarias de Colombia, which basically just means the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. And then they're fighting against what is basically just the Colombian military and the Colombian paramilitary. And the man who leads the FARC, who isn't alive anymore, but who started everything, his name was Dumar al-Houde, and he basically started up the FARC. And what it is it's a communist rebel group who believed in a communist-led Colombia under a Marxism-Leninism type rule. And most of the people, when they look at this conflict, they look at them as the bad guys, the FARC. And mostly, I mean, it's because they are really the bad guys because they're getting a lot of their funding from kidnap ransom situations, illegal mining, heavy Colombian drug trafficking, and a lot of extortion from the government on taxes. And the FARC is basically believed, nobody knows exactly how big they are at any point because it's really just, it's what it is it's a rebel group, so you can never really tally, it's hard to tally up everyone. But it's believed to have at any time usually around like 15,000 rebel soldiers in it. And so it's still very strong, and they're based in small areas of really heavy jungle where it's much harder for the military to get to them, so it's much safer for them. And so basically this whole conflict started about 100 years ago with small arguments over land disputes, and it's partially because Colombia is some of the richest and most fertile soil in the world, and it's full of all these resources like oil, copper, and iron. And over time, these conflicts have only worsened and worsened, and now it's just turned into a war with even more than two sides if you look at it really closely. And now many people view the FARC as the bad guys in the dispute, which they are in most cases, but you have to keep in mind that the main reason that the FARC was formed, or they were formed because of all these unnecessary attacks on small Colombian villages that were taking place by the government, who was senselessly basically going around killing people, claiming that they were looking for these communist groups that didn't even really exist yet. They had just been talking about them. And so that's what really brought them up to power, and that's what caused such a surge and uproar for them. So it's a big deal for them, and that's why they've gotten so big. And it's really, that's why you kind of have to look at it, and it's not completely their fault. And so, um, but yeah, so the government went in and they basically fought all these people and were killing all these people, and the FIRC started fighting them. And these fights in all these villages and all these towns in the rural areas forced a lot of people out of the country and into the more urban areas. And so in doing this, the government created like a huge group of people that are called the desplazados, or the displaced people. And but basically just what that means is that it's a group of people that is displaced now and can't live where they're really from. And so they're living in these urban environments where they really don't belong because that's not where they're from. And they have no way of making money because they're all basically farmers and people who have these fincas, or really large farms in the country in Colombia. And they're used to living there, so living in the city, it's hard for them to adapt, and they usually have very large families. So to feed a family in an urban city like that is really difficult for them. And their problem is they can't go home because a lot of their fincas, a lot of their land and everything have been taken over by these military groups. And so over the many years that the Civil War has been raging, so many different decrees have been written up, and so many peace treaties have been written up and disobeyed and thrown out over the 50 years that they've been fighting. And there's obviously been a lot of corruption with, I don't know if you guys know who Pablo Escobar is, but he's basically like the world's biggest drug trafficker. And there's a lot of confusion with him, and he ran a lot of things in the military, and he was paying a lot of people. And so But yeah, I want to focus on sorry, I want to focus on some of the more recent activity because to try and explain this whole revolution over the last 50 years, it would take so long to explain everything that's happened. So basically, I just want to jump into the 21st century. In the first decade, and from like around the 2000 to 2010, all you're gonna see is read about all these bombings that have taken place and these shooting sprees and killings and the FARC kidnapping people. What they do a lot of the times is they'll take if anyone from the FARC ever gets captured, and the military usually won't kill them or do anything, they'll just exile them from the country. But what they do is the FARC will kidnap other people and take them in, and then it gives them more power and more ability to get money or resources or whatever they need by kidnapping people. And so it's hard because you never get a peaceful solution out of anything. And so all these attacks have been on both like the military groups with kidnapping of police officers and military leaders, and even on innocent citizens. They'll take in hundreds of innocent citizens at a time and put them up for ransom to the government. And it's hard for the government to do anything for that. And so during all these fights and breakouts, even leaders like Hugo Chavez, one of the leading political powers in Venezuela, has tried to even help out many times for the Colombian government. And he doesn't try to help out with anything fighting, but fortunately he tries to help settle disputes and try to get a more peaceful realization to everything. And so in the beginning of 2011, the Colombian government had made it clear that the FARC had a very powerful hold on at least one-third of the country, and their attack on the military would only continue to rise through the following years as they had in the previous years. Then in 2012, the Colombian military launched a plan that they called Espada de Honor, the war plan, or the Sword of Honor war plan. This focused heavily on the FARC's strength points and worked on eliminating around like 15 of the FARC's most powerful military and economical fronts. So in doing this, they would be taking down the FARC by hitting all of their pressure points and taking away almost all of their power. Fortunately for the Colombian government, they had the help of one of the strongest military powers in the world, the United States. And the US had been caught multiple times with handing over unknown amounts of precision-guided missiles to the Colombian government, which they used basically to eradicate the FARC leading powers in all of all these onslaught surprise night and day PGM bombings. So basically they're just taking these missiles, and at night they're almost like, if you think of a heat-seeking missile, they can target people and where they have these camps at night, and they'll just go at night and blow all of them up. And that's huge for them, huge for the government, because it takes away a lot of the power for the FARC, because that's huge camps that they're destroying. So after this complete overwhelming attack by the military, the FARC was forced into signing a peace treaty, or at least going into talks about seriously committing to a treaty or otherwise facing basically total annihilation by the newfound military strength of the Colombian government. So finally, in late 2012, a series of peace treaties started to span, and I mean these treaties spanned for like 3 years. There were 21 rounds of conversations and meetings that they had in Havana, Cuba, because it was basically, for them, it was a neutral zone. And the people that were there included the leaders from the FARC, leaders of the Colombian military, in the Colombian government, and leaders in the Venezuelan government came to try and help out. And basically just representatives from all over to try and find a solution and negotiate a peace treaty. So obviously you can see there's been no perfect solution because there's been no treaty signed yet. And it's partially because the FARC has not been holding to their peaceful promise of neutrality. But neither has the Colombian government, so it's hard because neither of them really wants to be peaceful right now. They're just going back and forth all the time. And so one of the topics that's caused the most controversy has to do with the drug trade. And basically farmers that have been growing the crops to manufacture all these drugs that are going in and out of, or pretty much all out of Colombia, they rely heavily on these crops because they make all of their money off of them. It's where all their revenue comes from. So in order for them to reach a peaceful agreement with the government, they've been forcing the FARC to go out and try to get onto the peace treaty to get most drugs in the country legalized. Because then for them, they can grow it, but also for the FARC, this is bad because they won't make any more money off the drug trade. They'll make substantially less at least. So it's hard. They're kind of stuck in between a rock and a hard place in what they need to do. And so this, among a lot of the other conflicts, are what is up for discussion right now in these civil peace talks taking place in Havana. And there's a final solution, and until there's a final solution reached, there's still a large amount of danger all around the country, basically, caused by both the rebels and the military. It's not really a safe place to be right now. And until the conflict between the drugs reaches a peaceful resolution, no treaty will ever even be considered. Because unfortunately, the control of the land for coca production is the major conflict right now. I mean, the coca plant is basically everything in the country. That's where all of the revenue comes from for not only the government but all of these rebels. So as much as they don't want to admit it, that's where a lot of the government's money is coming from. And until conflict dies down, all of the displaced people are basically just going to continue to not only live in poverty, but are going to continue to fight for life as they battle all this senseless murder and starvation. So all these people are just waiting for all these talks, and there's meetings all the time. Right now they've had over, I think, 25 meetings now, and so they hopefully only getting closer and closer, and hopefully soon in the next couple of years they'll have reached a peaceful treaty and the power will start to be displaced all around in Colombia. But yeah, that was my project, so thanks guys.